Hi everyone. I'm coming back on to jump into another little deep dive to continue the conversation about managing energies and the experience of the empath. I think this is coming up right now because there is that collective shift happening, the closing of the last cycle, the culmination of all the lessons. People are moving forward, and I believe the collective that I was engaged with, which comprises many different groups, are also coming to conclusions about their own experience and their own connection to self, gnosis, and where to go from here in terms of working with everything we've learned over the last cycle. And so I'm going to just touch on a few important topics related to the empath and hopefully bring a bit more clarity for everybody seeking this information, allowing them to tie it into their own insights, and then bring forward something greater from it through this kind of decentralized intelligence that we're working with, which is the mainframe of the whole entire system, right? It's not what's highlighted. It's all of you. It's every individual going through their process that is creating the foundational movements of consciousness of what's happening in the world. So I wanted to make a distinction. I think this is really important to bring this forward. And the important distinction is that empaths often mistaken what they feel vis-a-vis their environment, other people, as something that is coming at them, sort of like an attack on their own field, especially the trauma-based empaths. But in general, I think it could apply to any hypersensitive person, whether that's through their physical constitution being different. There's a lot of different types of empaths out there, but the distinction is that when we're sensing things in the environment and in other people, what we are sensing is not, we're sensing what they are feeling, right? It's not what is trying to be imposed upon you, right? Because there's often this response to what you're sensing as an incoming threat or an attack. And so for me, over the years, I really had to understand that, when I'm picking up on very heavy emotions, whatever those physical sensations might be, are related to the person and what they are experiencing. There is a co-creative element where when two fields come together, they do create a third. And if they've gone through the Eros Gamos phase of the alchemical process, again, they're creating that ninth. That's something I discussed in a previous video, but either way, there is that element where when two fields come together, they are creating something together. And then you can access that field, which is a combination of both, right? What you're creating. And then tap into that and see, if that's something that, sensing into that, if that's something that is a positive for both individuals. You have to do it for yourself to know if it's a positive for you. But the first veil, the first level is, you're sensing the other person as you begin to, connect with their energy. And I think, people push back drastically when they feel things that feel negative in their body. And I think just being aware that it's not something you have to react to, because it's not something that is actually coming at you. It's something that the other person is feeling. Like, just that distinction alone is so important because it allows for you to create space, right? And you to create this healthy kind of it's like holding space for just experiencing, what the other is feeling, and knowing that it is connected to them and their experience, and that there's nothing that you need to do to correct that, simply because you are sensing it, right? And often the enmeshment and the entanglement happens because we choose, if we're coming at it from that wounded empath, we feel like we have to fix it. And that ties into personality complexes, the savior complex. But really, once you get through that and you understand that just because you could feel it doesn't mean you have to fix it, you kind of gain more emotional sovereignty and more empathic sovereignty. And you create that distance, right? So obviously, if it's something that doesn't make you feel good, it can make you tired, it can give you strange physical sensations in the body, that's what they're experiencing. And you could just set up boundaries again with the visualization and begin to move the energy. If it's come into your field and it's sticking in your field, you could begin to move the energy to dissolve that, to alchemize it, which will then give you even more room in terms of not feeling responsible for what the other is going through and experiencing. So we, and we do this as well with things we're picking up on at a distance, and the whole virtual astral realm is another layer that has come upon us with the advent of, the technological revolution that empaths in particular have to navigate through. And that as well, you need to have firm boundaries with all of that. But on a more personal level, wanting to work with people despite, their state, right? Because them being in, let's say, a negative state, or in physical pain, emotional pain, and mental pain, doesn't mean they're a bad person, right? It just means that they're going through something, and you might still want to, be friends with them, right? Or it could be someone you're in a relationship with, or someone you're working with. And so just because they're going through that, you don't want it to affect you to the point where you can't just be normal human in relationship, because you have these empathic abilities. So again, it's about understanding that it's not yours. So you don't have to react to it. You don't have to take responsibility for it. You're just setting up parameters, programming your field as per the parameters, of the things you want to let in and not let in. So if you're interacting with someone who is going through heavy experiences, there's a little bit of extra work involved in terms of setting up healthy parameters. If you're in the beginning stages of this, I think people just tend to push away the people that they are sensing, have all this stuff going on, because it's just too much. You don't want to feel it. And so people, empathic people just tend to push those people away to deal with the situation. But that's not a fully evolved, healthy individuated action, right? You want to be able to also manage people going through different things. Everyone's going through different things at different times, good states, bad states, health, unhealthy, all of these things. So it's about finding that balance, and then building yourself up, building the auric field up to be able to get to to a state where you're able to deal with people that are emitting heavier frequencies. Obviously, if it's overwhelming, then you're not in the place to deal with those people, and that's fine. You can go back into, healthy forms of solitude, and really just keep on building that up for yourself internally, so that you can get to a place where you're able to deal with people going through heavier, life events and just life, right? So that was the first thing that I wanted to bring up, because I think empaths in general get confused when they feel really strong emotions or sensations from other people. The stories, the emotional impressions that it leaves in their fields create ideas that tie into their own wounding related to, you know, it being a threat, right? And I think this sovereignty that we're coming into is, you know, really understanding that it's not coming at you. It's something that's within the other person. And then again, making a distinction between those stories are coming up, those impressions are then pulling up the files of your old wounding. It's going to create an unhealthy entanglement. It's going to create delusion and illusion. And then if you keep on building on that, you know, with a person, that's where you get into trauma bonding. So you want to be able to, you know, make sure that you're healing your own wounds so that when you are sensing other people and they are in a state of, you know, victimization or wounding, or just dealing with ailments and are unhealthy, you know, that you can discern, okay, that's theirs. And then again, you know, it's not yours to fix because you're sensing it and it's in your field. So from here, I wanted to kind of go into a few other things. One being, you know, as I went through the healing process within myself, vis-a-vis the gifts and the abilities that came online, because of the empathy, because of, you know, trauma-based empathy that was created vis-a-vis my environment and trusting my environment, there were a lot of healing abilities that came online with that. Because obviously if you're picking up on more information, you can do a lot more things, right? There's in every weakness that we have, there's a gift. And in every gift that we have, there's a weakness, right? So in those weaknesses, in that, you know, overextension of, you know, the emotional body just being so keenly attuned to what's happening in the environment, you can, you know, pick up on things that allow you to assist and help others because of it, right? So as I went through the healing process with all of this stuff, and healing my auric field personally, vis-a-vis my own psychology, my own bioenergetic sphere, my energetic centers, at one point, it's like these gifts that were trauma-based begin to diminish. And I think a lot of empaths don't want to give those gifts up because they've become used to them, and there's a form of validation or recognition that they get, you know, by having these gifts with the fine attunement. But in order to heal and to come into a state where we can allow more to enter, right, can accomplish more with a higher level of skill set, we have to give up certain abilities. You know, one door closes, another opens. So it's just I think the spiritual ego that gets built up, the persona, you know, that gets built up around what they can do because of their empathic nature. And then, you know, getting attached to that spiritual identity, right? Getting attached to that persona. They don't want to give it up. They feel like they will be at a loss and that they won't have much to offer people, you know, if they give up these gifts that they've developed and acquired because of that nature, because of the empathic nature. But I think it's an important message to put out, because I got to that point some years ago, and I gave up those gifts. Um, this also ties into, in some yogic practices, they talk about these different layers and levels of consciousness. And in order to get to the next level of consciousness, you have to move away, right, from the previous level. And so some cities, some mystics and gurus get to levels where they're able to do incredible things. They really are. But in order to continue to evolve and expand, they do have to give up these really big gifts. And, it's a choice that individual needs to make. It's very personal. But I promote continuing on the path of evolution. I promote healing that layer and walking into the unknown, right? Taking that path of the fool again, the beginner's mind, and you're never actually moving back. You're always moving forward, and the spiral is always spiraling up. So there's no real loss, even though it feels like a loss in the instant. It's always a step forward towards, I don't know if I should say better, because I think it's not better, it's just different. It's that next stage in your evolution. So I'm putting this out there to remove any, fears that people may have regarding the loss of their identities, regarding the loss of these skills, these abilities that they've acquired, so that they can feel confident in taking that next step forward in their own healing process. And it's going to come in. It's like energy never dies, right? It just transforms. So all those gifts and abilities just get transformed. That energy just gets transformed into something greater. Again, I don't want to use the word greater, but into something else. It could be viewed as greater by some. But I think the important thing is, not to be seeking, increased power in the world. It's more about honoring the natural process, the organic process of healing, and allowing that to unfold and to offer you that next stage in your development. Part of the issue, and something else I wanted to bring up with people who have developed these special gifts and abilities due to their empathic nature, is because they can feel so much. This relates to the first part of the audio that I put out. Because they can feel so much, they tend to be more controlling, right, with others. Because let's say if you're a psychic and you're picking up all this psychic information about someone that they are unaware of themselves, you feel not only the responsibility, but you also feel just the power in having that knowledge, right, and being able to control people around you. You feel the manipulation, right? You feel the subconscious motives. You feel all the shadow and, the latent potential in the individuals around you, and the truths that are still yet to rise to the surface. And because of that, some people can really feel it brings on the energy of, wanting to use that information to control different aspects of other people's development. And so that's where it could tend to move into the dark empath, right? And I think that is really important, and part of the initiation that empaths go through is that they have to make the right choice at that moment. If you choose to use that as as information or an ability to gain greater control of those around you versus greater control of yourself, and how to apply that knowledge back into the self, you yourself become manipulative, right? You yourself start moving away from that healthy reciprocative, relationship style into more of, the sociopath and the, I don't want to use too many big words that, are thrown around nowadays, regarding psychology, psychological diagnoses, but you don't want to become the monster you're fighting, basically. So if you're picking up on information and you're seeing a truth that has yet to be seen in individuals around you, again, it's not your responsibility to bring that forward and, smear it in their face. Everyone's moving through their own healing process and through their own individuation process, and it's stepping back with grace and just allowing that natural process to take place without feeling the need to control it, right? Or to take that to your advantage, right? To try and take advantage of every situation because you have these abilities. That is just going to have an effect. Everything in this universe has a cause and effect. That is just going to disconnect you further from your soul and from a soul path and from higher guidance, right? From divine intelligence and from spiritual development. It's when, the greater power you're given, the more responsibility you have in just allowing the natural evolution of things around you. So that is really the seat of the throne, is not taking advantage of any of your spiritual gifts that have come online for whatever reason. It could be born out of, trauma, or just born out of a natural experience, the experiences that you've had with the spiritual nature of this world. It doesn't matter, it's just a question of, allowing things to unfold naturally. Maintains your own spiritual integrity and maintains your own spiritual connection. And so that initiation is huge with people. And if you don't pass that initiation, there are consequences in terms of your own spiritual development, but there's also a lot of backlash that can occur in your life, because this divine intelligence that knows way more than us, and has these cosmic laws in place to really gauge, the spiritual evolution of people, will implement different things in your life so that you can then again learn those lessons, right? So again, we're always, if you're one of these people and you've experienced this, it's never too late to make the right decision. I always say, until we die, we are making decisions that have an equal effect on the next stage of our own soul evolution. So it's never too late. Everyone makes mistakes, but we need to correct them, and we need to understand what that spiritual integrity is all about so that we can move to the next stage, and that we can also allow this greater intelligence to do its work in the world, and not build up that spiritual ego so big because of psychic gifts or because of empathic abilities, where we feel like we are the ones to take control. That again goes back to Godheading, and it will burn your wings, right? Or it will just drown them in the water. So that was something that I wanted to bring through. I will end this by touching briefly on the elements and working with the elements as an empath to come back into balance, because everything in terms of spiritual development is about coming back to the center point. And the axis mundi, right? It is where heaven and earth connects. It's where we have all of these, this inner experiential spiritual development within our lives happening is at that cross point. And the cross point, if we boil everything down from the complex to the super simple, we're dealing with the elements. And we're dealing with water, earth, fire, air. We'll exclude ether because that is the spiritual substance which these elements emanate from. But here in this world, we have the empath will feel the weather, right? They're going to feel when it's raining out, right? How good that feels in the body because it's nourishing, and it helps things flow. It helps the emotions flow. It helps kind of move the emotional energy in the right direction and cleanse and purify. And when it's very dry and hot out, things can get a little tense because we're dealing with fire and air, right? And fire and air just makes bigger fire. And so it's just burning up everything, kind of forcing us into these mini alchemical processes where, again, we're shedding in a kind of quicker capacity. It's like a quickening. And earth is very stabilizing. It's very grounding, but sometimes it can bring us too much into a state of connecting with the material realm and moving away from the emotional realm, being less connected to the emotions and being less connected to the transformative aspects of fire, and less communicative, away from the air. And so we're constantly balancing, the earth is balancing itself through the weather and through the elements. And we can also use these elements within this, use them in the sense where we're using their qualities, right, through visualization and through action to move energy within our own bodies, within our own psyches, within our own auric field. And so, if you're dealing with a lot of emotion, you want to bring in the element, of fire, earth, and air, because if there's too much emotion, it could become stagnant, and that stagnancy, in order to move it, it needs a form of catharsis, which is the fire element. So it takes action, it takes movement. And that's where, even in relationships, if there's too much of an emotional element, there's too much water, the natural outcome is people tend to fight because it brings that, that fire and air back into the process to bring balance, because everything's trying to balance itself out. And so, working with the elements, you can kind of begin to balance your own inner state so that you can have a reference point to know, when a situation or, conversation or just your state of being is moving into one element more than another, to then bring in activities from the other elements to balance it out. Or if you're in a relationship and you're navigating that relationship with someone, you can bring in different elements when things become too stagnant or things become too stuck and too structured, too grounded, too much earth, or too much air, right? If there's just too much communication, right, in a relationship. Some people just have so much air, all they do is talk. You can bring in water, the water element. So you can bring in an emotional element, and that is going to, it's going to allow the air to soften. It'll just bring it back into balance. Air is, I think, a challenging one to work with, but earth will ground that energy, and it will quiet the movement of air. And you know, if you're dealing with a lot of fire, you feel like you're moving through a lot of transformation, that alchemical process is kicking in, and it's like things are burning up, burning up, burning up, and your nervous system is just like a live wire. You want to bring in earth and water. So, you know, you can take a bath, you can go swimming in a lake. All of these things really help to balance out the energy. But again, you got to test it for yourself. All of this is very experiential, right? It reminds me of one of my good friends. She's working with her garden, and you know, it's like it's this fine balance, right? The ecosystem is a fine balance. So just starting to pay attention to these things and understanding, you know, how your system functions, and if your astrological chart has more fire, or more air, or more earth, right, or more water. Naturally, you need to include elements of the opposite quality to just allow you to move beyond your chart, right? Because the chart it's not who you are. It's just the energies and the patterns that you've come in to work with and you know, overcome, in a sense, to evolve through. So, you know, you can analyze it that way, and I guess, you know, that's kind of summing it up. But I think, you know, one of the mistakes I made with the water element is I have a lot of fire and air in my chart. So water feels really good. I've always been a huge swimmer. I'll swim across lakes. I'll, you know, go swimming whenever I can. But if you bring in an overabundance of that element, it can have like the opposite effect. So when I was taking too many baths, you know, about 10 years ago, it was really just way too much, and it brought on way too much psychic, like that empathic ability just opened up even more, and there was just way too much access to all of these, you know, astral realms, and feeling it so much, you know, in my body, like just so much emotions connected to all these different layers, and the psychic, you know, gifts just amping up. And giving that up again goes back to, you know, having to give up different abilities, right? But to bring balance to yourself. At the end of the day, coming into wholeness and embodiment isn't about giving anything up. Like you know, you're not really giving things up. You're coming into balance, which is the healthy state of co-creating in this world. So, you know, if you're taking too many baths and you have migraines and you have, you know, you're dealing with a lot of just, you know, psychic phenomena and stuff like that, just stop taking baths. So I'm bringing a focus onto the elements for those that are tuning in and they want to start, you know, balancing all of these elements within their lives and within their relationships, you know, understanding what needs to be brought into a situation to bring balance. Boiling it down to the most simplistic view of it is by understanding the elements properly, the qualities that they bring, and how to use them in your life, what activities to do. You know, what kind of activity is this? Is this a water activity? Is this a fire activity? Is this air? And working with nature, working with the weather, working with the earth, to help bring balance as well. You know, if it's raining out and you're feeling that lush energy come in, it is prime time to be planting seeds within your own psyche, within your own body, about what it is you're co-creating, right? So we have these mini cycles within these greater celestial cycles, within these greater epochs. So I hope that helps everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. You could reach me at inspiringplayfulevolution.com. Take care.